as global trade realigns and fresh capital flows reshape Africa's economies, I caught up with some of the most influential business figures from across the continent.
We have to create a country, an economy, and the private sector is key. If you look at the most successful economies in the world, they've succeeded because the private sector has identified those countries as good places to invest, good policies, whether it's legislative or fiscal or tax. The governments welcome investment. So the private sector in this country is critically important. America is a developed economy. Europe is a developed economy. We are a developing economy. So we've got to make sure that the perceptions and the perspectives about South Africa as an investment destination, that those views are very good for us. But that's based on what we do, because there's a lot of work that we have to do. And there's good things that we are doing, but there's still a lot of challenges that confront us.
Does the relationship with the U.S. concern you?
Well, I heard the minister saying that there's 200,000 South Africans who are employed by American companies. It's very important. In a country where we've got so much unemployment, we are doing everything possible in the private sector, and also to the extent that we work together with government to make sure that every single business, whether it's American, European, Indian, Chinese, or Brazilian, finds this to be a good place to be. And we will continue, for us in the private sector, we will continue building good ties. It's very important. With Europe, with America, with Asia.
The continent is redefining its growth trajectory by prioritizing sustainable development. It's looking at regional collaboration and also the participation of the private sector to drive progress. And for us, that is really so important, that Africa has got so much potential that it offers to the world. I mean, there's some amazing statistics. For example, by 2030, the agriculture sector is going to be $1 trillion. By 2029, we have got the fastest growing population that uses the internet. By 2090, about 1.1 billion internet users. And all of those present opportunities for Africa. You can look at all the various sectors. And the crossroad is really about Africa embracing its potential and then partnering with each other on the continent and with the rest of the world to attract flows into the continent, and for the rest of the world to play its part in unlocking the potential for Africa.
The intra-Africa trade is tiny. It's 14 to 16%. If you look at the intra-trade in Europe, it's 75%. That's the opportunity. But what the principles that we put in our discussions now with the trade ministers, or at least the counterparts in Africa, one, we should not leave any country behind. Second, we need to develop and help each other in the development and of how we progress together, because we can't ignore countries in that journey. Third, it's our ambition in Africa to keep our raw materials in Africa, to deepen our localization, to make sure that we industrialize and we take it in stages. And I think these priorities are not. But again, what we're doing today with the key countries, again, we're here in South Africa, I have a meeting after this with the Minister of Trade and Industry, is that we need to take trade bilaterally to different levels. The trade between us is tiny. And again, when in Cairo, when I saw the minister, I told him doubling, and I felt doubling is nothing. We need to triple the trade. But we also need to address the challenges, because if we take it on the surface, then we're going to solve the issue. The trade, there is a limitation trade. The cost of shipping is very high. We need to have this connectivity with the ship liners, the air cargo, the banking systems that needs to be available for this trade. I think this is the future. This is the time for us to focus. We have the people, we have the raw materials, we are in a very unique location, and despite whatever happening globally, going back to the point about the global, again, divergence, if we are to say, this is the time for the South. This is the time where we need to build our strategies.
RCEP, CPTPP, all these are, I would say, evolution of different multi-blind approaches. I think that that's the world that it's heading towards. The South-South trade is a very important one going forward because 20 years ago, South-South trade only accounted for around 5% of global trade. Today, it's 20% and rising extremely fast, right? So the two components that feed into that has got to be consumption, trade, and infrastructure. The world has seen a huge proliferation of population. From literally 100 years ago, 2 billion, now 8 billion. Most of these are in the global south. I do think infrastructure is a real economic backbone towards that growth and also a backbone of humanity's progress. And unfortunately, this is exactly where emerging markets can afford least for some of these infrastructure. It is very important. That's why I also co-chair the B20 task force around infrastructure, because I do think this infrastructure deficit is something that we have to fix. The world cannot turn our eyes away from it.
We have ran a very aggressive diversification strategy, and I think from the SARS stats, the green shoots are beginning to show. As you have already said, yes, China in the agriculture, beef, and many products in that space of agriculture has come in handy. The European Union has been a lifesaver. They've come in a big way, including putting almost 200 billion gateway investment into the South African economy. And the Middle East, many countries are also coming in a big way. Obviously, most of them in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia are looking for a free trade agreement that will enable this to flow faster and quicker. And that is something we're looking at as the South African government. But we're happy that already you can see the numbers coming through. And also, obviously, the coming in of the AFCTA is also a big one because that remains the big market for South African products.